Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. I thought I'd take a recess break and before we get on to the next incident. But I've just wanted to touch base on a few key points in my journey. At that point of time of my career and my private life. So the incidents that I've already just disclosed basically was around, let me see, roughly 2007 onwards. But without getting into into details of everything, but others who've been following me and watching me, or even been involved in my case secretly in the past, will know what I'm talking about. But at that time, I was, because I know you all want to know a little bit more about my background and as regards to my career. I've actually been I've worked in different departments over the years, and at one time I was working in a permanent job out in one state in South Auckland, and then circumstance changed. And I moved back to West Auckland and lived with my family. And then I had to actually look for a job closer to home. And I've been I was a professional single mum, working in a government job, but in a different department. So what had actually happened was I had moved, circumstance had changed, and I'd moved to West Auckland from south. So I had moved from one state to another state, but I continued on working at South for the next few months or so. Oh my gosh, I'm just trying to think how long I did those trips. I think maybe 3 months I worked. Just a rough estimate. I worked at another state, which was south, and I lived in another state, which was out west, and it was like about 20 to 30 minutes travel to work. That's if the traffic wasn't good. Was good, I mean, but if the traffic was terrible, it would take probably an hour or so to get travel back and forth. But I used to leave early hours in the morning just to beat the traffic to get to work. So the trip took like 30 to 40 minutes to travel. So it was still quite a bit of a distance depending on the traffic. If it was the traffic could take, if I was traveling in the peak hours when everyone's finishing work, you're looking at probably an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours to get home. But yeah, it was quite a massive distance to travel, but I did that for like a couple of months or so until I had tried to look for a job closer to home. Now, back in those days, it was easy to look for a job, and you only had to look in the paper, and you put in your job application back in those days, and you apply for a job by sending your CV, and then they do their process, and then they let you know whether you made it in for an interview or for the shortlisting process. So I got that job. I saw that job advertised in the paper at that time, and but I'd had quite a few job interviews before this job that got me into the courts. But I had quite a few job interviews, and if you can understand at that time of my life, I was like, I had these 3 children under my care, and then so I was traveling to work. Oh my goodness, every morning, full-time job. It was a permanent job, and I was traveling back and forth early hours in the morning, getting home just before the, like early afternoon, because I chose morning just to fit in with what was going on in my circumstance at that time, being a full-time mother and looking after my children full-time as a single parent. So I did that for a couple of months, and I applied for several jobs until this job came through. So by this time, this job I saw advertised in the paper, but the job was actually in the city. But I thought to myself at that time, I was like really tired of applying for jobs, and I almost got a few good jobs, but I sort of like just missed out, probably like 0.5 or however they mark it back then, because I'd applied for several jobs, but it was a very stressful time for me. Had all, with the full-time mother, full-time mum and at home, and then work full-time and traveling, and so it was a very, very full-on time for me. Had no time really for anything else, but that's how it was for me. And then I saw this job advertised back then it was the New Zealand Herald. I didn't, I saw it and I thought, I just read it and I thought, it looks okay, I'll give that a go. And so, because I read the job description, what they were looking for, and I thought, I can do all that. So I I applied for the job myself, and by this time I was exhausted. I was tired from looking for different jobs, and I thought to myself, I thought to myself, if I didn't get this job, I was going to give job searching a break, because I was absolutely exhausted. I was burnt out from all the things that, just the pressure of everything that was going on at the time. But I applied for this job and I got my foot in the door for an interview. So I went for a job interview, and then I made it through to a panel interview. That was the process. You went through to 2 separate interviews back then. So I made it through to a panel interview. A panel interview is where, there's more than 1 or 2 or 3 managers at the time. So that's how I got the job. So I got my foot in the door back then. So that was a real blessing. But at the time, I didn't really realize the kind of job I had applied for. I read it and I just sort of like, I can do all that, the job description and stuff like that. But I didn't really realize what the actual job entailed until I actually went through the whole training process, which I did. But that's another story on its own, and maybe I'll cover those pointers at another time. But I just wanted to get to the point that at this time, I got my foot in the door. So I was so happy. I got the job, full-time position, permanent position for this job. And this job was how I got my foot in the courts. Back then it was called Department of Courts. So it was very, very, very different. Job searching was very, very different. Privacy laws were treated really serious. No one tolerated it. Any breach was like, really, 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 really serious stuff. Nobody took that as a joke. But that was how I got my occupation with the courts. Okay, so before we go any further, I'd like to articulate that the laws at your country is different to the laws in my country. So my advice is don't compare, because no set of circumstance and case are exactly alike. Yeah. However, what I do suggest that you do is to focus on or try and originate the specifics of what is the wrongdoing and the behavior or action in each set of circumstances. So what I've actually done is I've actually disclosed some key incidents that are really, 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 really important to support my case, and also the reasons why at that time I had used the legal system to try and protect myself or to avoid anything getting worse, or for example, an invasion of privacy in my private life at that time. Okay. Also, I want you to take into account your own knowledge and experience and belief and culture, and just think what laws comes into account that is relevant and applicable if it was you. So what I'm talking about and what I'm walking everyone through in my channel is my own journey, nobody else's, my journey. And so, but I want you to look at the incidents that I've disclosed on what if it was you. What would you do? What would I do if I came across the same sort of circumstances, just in your own environment or in your own wherever you are today, because everybody has them. You can't avoid life's issues, you can't avoid problems, you can't avoid people hating on you, because people do, but what has happened to me has happened to me. I didn't go looking for the problem. These things came to me. There were people coming in my personal space, and what I did as my reactions and my actions at that time was I wanted to protect, I did, I'm so private, I don't like people being in my personal space. But this is what I'm trying to use to, think of ways, how would you protect yourself if it was you? Because what has happened to me has creeped up on me, and I knew it was a scam, and common sense with everything that I already knew before it happened or started to happen, I knew it was long-term repercussions were going to be serious. Okay, so I got my foot in the door with this job. I was really rapt. I got the job, but this job, it was the biggest changing time for me in every area of my life. I learned so much back then that I didn't understand, which now I understand, and I'm so grateful for everything that I've gone through and for hanging in there when things were pretty tough. I could have easily walked away. But this job, I worked for the Department of the Courts. I was a deputy registrar for jury trial depositions. Back then, it's the highest you can go as far as learning, court process, managing high-profile cases for the High Court and the District Court. So that was where I first started in my career working with the courts. That's my experience. Okay, and so what that job actually entailed. It entailed case managing high-profile court cases for the High Court and the District Court cases. So I got to see all the core, what do you call it? Just one moment. Yeah, I got to oversight the hardcore cases of society back then. When I say hardcore cases, I'm talking about murder cases, I'm talking about serious fraud cases, sexual violation cases, and it was a real eye-opener. It was for someone with my bit of background and my upbringing and stuff like that, it was an experience that I'm grateful that I had, but it wasn't an easy job, and I did go through a lot of learning process in this job, but that's where I've got my foot in the door back then. But back then it was easier to find a job because privacy laws were pretty tight, and no one tolerated things like breaches, let alone the use of substitutes. That was not tolerated or even heard of being used within the workplace, or in your public, the criminal harassment that I've gone through for a very long time. It was never heard of, and if it was a sort of a system that the drug dealers or the mafias would use, but now it seems like everyone seems to be using it. Companies are using it for cultures, or people are doing it, but it is still criminal activities. And as far as my understanding is concerned, and the laws are concerned, all those laws that protects an individual from being subject to anything unlawful, they do still exist. Even though the system has changed so much, those laws still exist. And my advice is, if you're going through anything that is suspicious and it's not of your consent, the best thing for you to do is actually use the complaint process. And I might just do a separate video just on stuff like that to help you with the complaint process, and the different organisations and agents, more government agencies that you can use. And also, but that they are things that you need to be aware of, and it does creep up on you. So yeah. Okay, so join me in my next video clip, and we'll continue on with my story or my testimony. But I think by the end of everything, you'll understand where I'm coming from, more so the way the system is now, and and the danger of not knowing or having any knowledge of what to do when you find yourself being lured into a scam, or all these things happening to you as an individual. But before I go, I just want to thank everyone that's actually been watching my channel. As you can tell, I'm very new at what I'm doing, and honestly, I never thought I'd be doing something like this, but at this stage I'm just doing it as a hobby, and also I just thought it was just another way of helping the public and sharing my experiences. And then so I'll just leave it at that for now, and I'll talk to you in my next video, which will be very soon.